Alright, so we're going to be checking out a video request by Excalibur324 on the Discord. And this is a request for PancreasNoWork, and the name of the request is Nagash, Warhammer's Biggest Jerk. Now, Tomb Kings are Tomb Kings. If you ask me how much do I know about Warhammer Fantasy, decent amount. Decent amount. Nothing too substantial. I clocked out at the end times. I completely clocked out at the end times. I know about the Skaven, yes, and I know about other things like that, but you can't ask me to really get into the, Ever Chosen when he gets kicked in the balls by an orc. No. I'll stick to Warhammer 40k, and I'll have fun with my lasers. Pew pew. In any case, Nagash is different, though. Nagash is a name that I know. It's one of those names that when you get into any kind of fandom, they're going to mention something to you. Like in 40k, if you introduce somebody into 40k, one thing that you're going to say within the first 20 minutes is you're going to talk about Horus. You're going to talk about Magnus. You're going to talk about, I don't know, different Primarchs. There's always going to be certain characters that you mention. Well, Nagash is one of those characters in Warhammer Fantasy, just because, well, he's a dick. There are a lot of dickish characters in Warhammer Fantasy. Malekith's mother, who he had a sexual relationship with, which... no. In any case, let's get into this. Let's enjoy it. Warhammer Fantasy. This is so strange because I've had this channel for a number of years now, and I've checked out a lot of stuff. And one thing I have not checked out is anything fantasy related. I really don't think I've watched anything fantasy related on this channel yet. First time for everything, let's go.
In Warhammer Fantasy, something about the good guy characters is that even when they do horrid things, they do it out of the love for their people and nation that they have. Karl Franz, Teclis, even some evil characters like Vlad von Karstein do some pretty dark things out of wanting their people to survive and prosper. They genuinely believe these things are a necessary evil to survive in the horrid world that they live in. They try to be good people despite the cards they've been dealt, oftentimes forcing them to do dark acts. With that in mind, there's something to be said about a character who is just an unrelenting piece of shit at every turn for no better reason than because why not? No, this isn't another video about the Skaven, though they will feature in it. Allow me to tell you the story of Nagash, Warhammer's biggest douchebag. Nagash was born in ancient Nehekara thousands upon thousands of years before Warhammer Fantasy mostly takes place. He was the first son of the reigning ruler, which at first makes you probably think, oh, he's gonna be doing great, he'll be king and all that good stuff. And in literally any other kingdom, you'd be right, but in Nehekara, the firstborn son doesn't become king, it's the secondborn one. The firstborn is stuck being sent off to join the mortuary cult to learn all about death and keeping pacts with the Nehekaran gods and all that stuff that doesn't involve ruling with unlimited power.
And you can be guaranteed that that goes over so well with the firstborn.
And Nagash hated it. He was a sociopathic dickhead from day one and wanted to be king. There was, however, a brief moment in time where his father Katap led a military campaign against Elizamon but fell ill, whereupon Nagash took over the campaign for him and briefly ruled a city he saved as a king for 6 months. This happened before he was forced to join the mortuary cult, so not only did he get power taken away from him, now he had a taste of what he could have had if he was born just a bit later. Also, his dad removed all records of him actually doing the ruling of the city and leading the campaign, and just had him referred to as a brave warrior. Bit of a dick move, but given what Nagash is going to be getting up to shortly, probably not undeserved. Thankfully, during his father's funeral, a solution to all his problems was practically handed to him on a silver platter. Diplomats from another kingdom arrived with 3 dark elf prisoners to be given to Zandri, Nagash's kingdom, as a sacrifice. Nagash promptly went, "I assure you, everyone, I can handle it from here," and stole them away. When he was embalming his dad's corpse, he realized that dark magic must have played a part in his death, and he correctly assumed that the 3 pointy-eared assholes in front of him were at least somewhat responsible. So he stuck them in his dad's pyramid, filled the entire thing with lethal traps and whatnot, and told them they can either teach him magic or join his father in the grave. Naturally, they decided to help him, though being elves, they of course made sure to tell him that he was still inferior the entire time.
Pretty much.
That he gave a shit, he got that spicy forbidden knowledge either way. He learned how to do magic without relying on the gods, all about chaos and the fun stuff that entails, and that if a human is extra careful, they can use one of the winds of magic. Of course, not all of it at once like the elves, but hey, better than nothing. Eventually, the Dark Elves, of course, managed to escape, but right as they got to the exit, they found good old Nagy waiting for them. He told them that they either had to beat him in a magical duel to escape or get back in that tomb, so help them, and the elves figured, we're elves, we got this. But
so let's
in fact, they did not have this, and Nagash ate all of their souls.
Oh, lovely.
This is where things really started to go well for Nagash, and poorly for everyone who isn't Nagash.
Sweet.
As a quick side note, though, those 3 elves were also involved in the false flag operation that started the massive war between the High Elves and the Dwarfs. So if you ever wondered how the hell all of the horrible things of the Warhammer world managed to come to power, including Nagash, it's because Malekith and his Dami Mommy threw a hissy fit powerful enough to destabilize nations. Anyway.
No, it's because elves are dicks. Flat out. And, you know, like Fething Father, like Fething Son, the space equivalent of elves are dicks as well. The War of the Beard could have been averted by the elves actually being honest, but they decided not to. Instead, a dwarf comes into and this is for you that don't know, a dwarf comes into, you know, the Elven Kingdom, and he's sitting there talking to Keldor II. He's telling him, elves have attacked our convoys, and you need to recompensate us for this, because you have attacked our convoys, and we don't know why you've attacked our convoys, but, you know, what the hell, man? Your people are attacking my convoys. Kalidor, all he had to do was take the dwarves seriously, because the dwarves were not known for lying, and either one, and I'm a little bit shady on the lore if they knew about Malekith at this point, or if this was before the whole schism, everything like that. I think it was after the schism that this happened. All he had to do was tell him, look, here's the deal. Here's the situation. This is what's going on. Blah, 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 blah. Instead, they decided to, in one of the worst diplomatic moves you could possibly do, grab said dwarf diplomat, basically restrain him and shave him. And the dwarves have a huge-ass book called the Book of Grudges. And they have it, and they write down anytime somebody pisses them off. They document you pissing them off. That's what they do. You know, you get in the Book of Grudges for shortchanging a dwarf. You get in the Book of Grudges for insulting a dwarf. You get in the Book of Grudges for a lot of shit. Shaving a dwarf, the dwarves' beards are a symbol of not only their personal, like, it's legitimately everything to them. They don't even, like, if you get offered to help a dwarf groom his beard, he's basically giving you the keys to his kingdom, his firstborn, and his anal virginity, all wrapped up in a single basket, and telling you not to mess with it. And, you know, I trust you with all this. That's basically what the dwarf is doing. And they shaved that sort of thing off of a dwarf. And the dwarf diplomat went back to his kingdom, walked in, and everybody everybody was looking at a clean-shaven dwarf coming to stand before the king. And legitimately everybody started reaching for fucking pens to write in the Book of Grudges, because it collectively pissed off the entire civilization, which led to what he just alluded to. And now I'm not going to do a lore video on the War of the Beard.
Anyways, Nagash, he commensurated his newfound power by murdering him.
Sorry for the rant, guys.
His brother's court and burying him alive. Already off to a fantastic start, He began to get really into his magical research. He invented necromancy. Well, I mean, alright, not technically, but he was the first one to make meaningful progress with it. Meaningful progress here meaning potions of eternal life and entire armies of undead soldiers.
Sweet!
Let no one say he doesn't get shit done. He did almost the whole evil magic shebang. shebang. Mass sacrifices, torture, kidnapping people to sacrifice and torture. The only thing I don't think he did was make pacts with dark gods, because then he wouldn't be the one in charge. He wrote 9 books, creatively called the 9 Books of Nagash, which, fair enough, I guess. These contained the secrets of all he had learned, though because he put a portion of himself in each of them, only he could get the full power out of them. Why he needed to get the power out of the books he wrote, I don't know, but I guess even without the knowledge, they're still incredibly powerful magic artifacts, so maybe that's why. Or just because he's a dick. That's always a good reason to go for when you're talking about Nagash. Then he started his trend of building massive black pyramids, at least partially made out of warpstone. First he bankrupted Khemri building it, not only wasting the treasury, but thousands of lives on top of that. Then he figured that if he was going to build this, he might as well full send it, and did pretty much the same thing to all of Nehekara. Eventually no one could stomach him turning their once mighty nation into a continent-sized decaying remnant of what once was, so basically the city of Chicago scaled up, so they all rebelled. Nagash responded by raising a massive army of the dead, and then killing his wife, who for the record was his brother's wife before he murdered his brother. He was also abusive and probably sexually assaulted her, because at this point there were only so many ways to make him even more of a shitbag, the writers probably just felt obliged to cross that off the list. Despite all this, he assumed no one was actually going to challenge him once he rose to power. Surely no one was dumb enough to do that. He was very wrong, and the armies of 7 Tomb Kings cast him out of power and murdered all of his lieutenants. Turns out a 7-nation army could hold him back. Who knew? Of course he slipped away like the weasel he is, and they couldn't destroy his pyramid, but hey, he's gone. Sure, the land's in crippling debt, famine, the gods are pretty much gone because Nagash killing his wife broke an ancient pact, and barbarians from everywhere else are raiding across the land willy-nilly. But hey, at least the big bad was defeated once and for all. It turns out the big bad wasn't defeated once and for all. Nagash wandered in the desert for a little while, kinda like Moses but evil. At one point he died, but he decided that dying is cringe, so he just possessed his body and kept on walking.
He dies, then possesses his own body. Yeah, there we go.
Some Skaven, murdered some Skaven, and then took a bite out of the warpstone they had on him. Instantly, 2 things happened from this. 1, it was like he ate a senzu bean and recovered a pretty sizable portion of his power. And 2, his senses got all screwed up like that one scene from Gravity Falls where the guy has an eyeball for a mouth and he just kind of watered the desert aimlessly for over a century. To fast track things a little bit, after that little oopsie, he found a human tribe living on a mountain. He saw how they were mining warpstone, took it over, and then turned it into a magical fortress called... seriously? Nagashazar. Because of course that's what he called it. He fought some Skaven to a standstill and made a truce with...
Hey guys, I wonder where Nagash is.
them, which neither side expected to last for more than 5 minutes, then made not only his evil armor, but his crown of sorcery. The armor is whatever, you know, it's just standard evil bad guy armor.
Yeah.
But the crown is important, and it'll show up later. By this point, vampires started bothering him, because someone else found his formula for eternal life, but couldn't get the recipe quite right. The first time someone tried to contact him, he magically strangled them from a continent away. But eventually, he figured these super powerful undead might make for some good minions, and recruited them to his cause. He also may have been guiding them the whole time, but either way, he's got his new lieutenants and decided that he'd take another crack into Hekara, and so he did. And a lot of people died. Like, a lot. His forces started wreaking havoc, and the chief king of the realm, Akadizar, was taken from his throne and imprisoned by Nagash. And then the Skelly Man decided it was time to up the ante. How, you might ask? Why, by casting a spell that would resurrect every last corpse on the planet under his control. All of them. Ever. This was after not only the Great Chaos Invasion, but the massive war between elves and dwarfs, as well as the Elven Civil War and Malekith's Hissy Fit. So...
yeah, does any of those wars matter when you're talking about people that were going to be dead anyway, most of them at this point?
There were a few corpses lying around. The stakes have risen somewhere into the stratosphere by this point, and what didn't help was that Nagash, while doing this, decided to kill every single living being in Nehekara first just to piss off Alkadizar. Alkadizar also needed to be alive as a focus for the power of the spell. Since he ruled Nehekara, he would serve as a symbol for everything in it to focus on, so Nagash could murder everything in it. But I have no doubt in my mind Nagash mostly just kept him alive to be a shitheel. But he forgot about one crucial detail. Those goddamn rat people. They realized that every corpse on the planet included Skaven corpses, which are always plentiful, and that either way, world domination would include wiping them out. So the Skaven freed Alkadizar, gave him a dagger made of pure warpstone that started killing him the moment he touched it, and told him to go stab the guy at the center of a hurricane of magic. And right as everything but he and Nehekara was dead, including the plant life, he cut off Nagash's hand. He wasn't dead, but at least the spell hadn't gone global. And thus did an epic battle for the fate of the world begin, in which the Skaven were actually using magic the whole time to help Akadizar, because that's how afraid they were of Nagash. He made Skaven willingly work with other people and not screw them over because of how afraid they were of him. Jesus fuck. Epic battle occurs then ends. I'm sure there's some stuff to say in it, but I mean, it's an epic fantasy battle. The good guy ends in the win. What the fuck did I just say? Nagash is dead, but so is Nehekara. Of course, since losing his hand...
I am mood conjured to that.
And caused Nagash to have an oopsie-whoopsie with the spell. All of the Nehekarans that died in the past came back with varying levels of sentience. The Tomb King started infighting, and now there's all sorts of claims to the throne and a whole ton of shit going down.
Yep.
But that's irrelevant. Nagash is gone now, and this time the good guys actually beat the big bad for certain, even if it was at a measurable cost. Definitely this time.
Yep.
He's definitely gone.
No.
It turns out that Nagash was not actually gone.
Shocker.
He basically invented necromancy. Are you surprised? I mean, seriously. No, of course he was very weakened, both from the sword and from the souls of all the people he killed beating the shit out of him in the afterlife. So it took him 1,111 years to finally come back again. When he did come back, he had to find all of his magical stuff, and he had to reforge his hand since Al-Qadizar cut it off, but hey, he's back. Unfortunately, he was unlucky enough to come back to life at the same time as Sigmar Unbroken, the still just a man, the myth, the legend himself. And Sigmar, being a big fan of smashing things with his hammer, proceeded to smash Nagash with his hammer.
Yes.
To be fair, he had to wear Nagash's crown after he found it in order to resist Nagash's magic, but he still won. I mean, he's Sigmar. Of course he won. He's the best god emperor and the second best emperor in Warhammer. And now Nagash was definitely gone. For certain. Absolutely, definitely gone.
No.
It turns out that Nagash was, he's not gone, alright. Of course, this time it took a lot longer for him to come back. His spirit did kind of influence some stuff and quietly direct things for a few thousand years, and more directly guide Arcan, but he didn't do too much otherwise. And then the end times happened. Naturally, the big man was...
Okay, I did not, I heard some of the stuff that was happening in the end times. I did not pay much attention to the end times in Warhammer Fantasy, because I heard some of the stuff that was happening, and I was like, oh my god, come on, really?
Due for a comeback tour. He started it by resurrecting himself by having Arcan sacrifice Tyrion and Alariel's daughter, the Fey Enchantress, and Volkmar the Grim. Presumably several thousand other peasants and such as well on top of them, because this lich cannot do anything without being a prick about it. He shows back up on all of his pointy-hatted glory, and literally everyone on the planet, including the Chaos Gods, starts shitting their pants. Because this time around, he ate the god of the dead and caused the dead around the world to resurrect. Now that he's back, first order of business, obliterate Nehekara, which he promptly did. Sledger did put up a fight and say the most badass line in all of Warhammer history, but he still got exploded by Nagash in the end. After he was done with revenge about 10,000 years in the making, Nagash drained the power of the dwarf god Valaya because one god clearly wasn't enough for him. Right. And he brings all of the undead on the planet under his control and starts forcing the entire wind of death into Sylvania. By this point, he decided that it was safe for him to take a bit of a breather, so he decided to chill in his coffin for a while. Also, remember the Black Pyramid he built? He floated it all the way to Sylvania. Imagine picking up the Great Pyramids of Giza and floating them over to Romania, only double the distance because the Warhammer world is huge. He used it to start becoming even more powerful, but he once again made a massive mistake. He forgot he existed on the same planet as the Skaven. By this point, the Skaven had decided to become part of Chaos because the writers needed the end times to happen eventually, and that was a good way to do it. A massive demon army led by...
Which was stupid.
A traitorous lieutenant of his shows up, and while it was held back thanks to Nagash's power, the Skaven sneaked on under to the pyramid and blew it up with magical nuclear warheads. Understandably...
In other words, the plot line for Stardate.
A little bit annoyed, he destroyed every single demon on the field with one massive blast of magic. Then realizing that between blowing his load too early and with his pyramid gone, he had no way to achieve godhood in time, so he reluctantly went to ally with the living. Teclis did try to get him on their side a while ago, but Nagash was still up his own ass and turned him down, and also probably disintegrated the elf he sent to ask him. Also, another quick side note, but how he hadn't achieved godhood after devouring 2 entire gods is an excellent example of Games Workshop's writing ability. Anyways, he goes to Apeldoran to meet up with the other incarnates of the Winds of Magic, and they barely managed to squeak out an alliance. To seal the deal, he gave Manfred to the living as a sort of prisoner exchange, which was pretty funny. Manfred is even like, hey wait, what the hell man, before getting put in a box or something. He also mocks Tyrion and Alariel for not being to save their daughter and prevent his resurrection, because of course he does. During negotiations, Chaos shows up to stop the alliance, and Nagash brutalizes anything chaotic in front of him, and solos a bloodthirster. Nagash, giant douchebag, but great in a fight. Everyone's still alive, teleports to Middenheim to stop Chaos from overtaking the world, and Nagash continues on as he has and one-shots anything stupid enough to get in front of him before resurrecting their corpse. See, this is why I love him, or at least love to hate him. He's such an unrepentant asshole, but he does it with such style that I'm still happy he's around. During the fight, he eventually fought Kabanda the Bloodthirster, which required a bit more effort out of him. First, he had to choke him out like a bitch before erasing him from the world. As the climax of the battle is coming up, they go to stop the Chaos Rift from overtaking the world, and then, Manfred decided that now is the time to betray everyone and stabs Gelt in the back. Tyrion stabs Manfred in the back in return, but it's too late. As the world is overtaken by chaos, Nagash loses all of his magic and is last seen crumbling the dust while panicking. And thus does the story of Nagash come to a close.
But not really.
Definitely.
But not really.
It turns out that I have about 3 jokes to work with per video because I am not clever or funny, and also that Nagash's story did not come to a close. After the world exploded, Chaos stuck him in a crypt of forgotten moments after the end times, which sounds like some BS nothing, but whatever. Sigmar frees him to help him restart reality, and they start beating the snot out of monsters even the Chaos Gods were afraid to mess.
Which doesn't make any damn... I did not like the end times. It didn't make any damn sense for Sigmar to free this guy.
And he's a god too now. He's finally moving up in the world. Except now he has 7 other incarnate gods to deal with of roughly equal strength to him on top of the Chaos Gods. He did pimp slap Marathi when she tried to sleep with him though, so at least his treatment of women hasn't changed after all these years. Then again, it's Marathi, and if there's ever an elf that deserved to be slapped upside the head over and over, it's definitely her. He immediately begins planning to betray Sigmar and everyone else, because at this point I'm pretty sure being an asshole is a core part of his soul or something. Speaking of souls, he also claims all the souls of those who die as belonging to him on the basis of do trust me on this one. That's why he really hates Sigmar now, because the Stormcast get reforged and he only gets a sliver of their soul each time they die. But I get ahead of myself. Nagash ate all the other fucking diabetes, man. Nagash ate all of the other death gods, which somehow still didn't boost his power above everyone else, because Nagash can never win. Chaos invaded, and Nagash is actually the last one of Sigmar's pantheon to leave him. Unsurprisingly, on his way out, he basically kicks Sigmar in the balls by leaving his forces to rot while Chaos runs rampant, and Nagash goes back home to the realm of death. Somehow, having not have expected this,
it doesn't make any sense.
Sigmar is thoroughly sick of his shit by this point and runs to Shyish to beat the hell out of him, but was so mad he kind of forgot about the whole Chaos invasion running rampant thing going on. Sigmar loses the battle because Archaon tricked him and made him get rid of Gal Maraz, and everything goes super grim and dark and looks like Games Workshop is going to end times AOS before it even begins. Nagash tries to solo Archaon, gets his shit pushed in, and then goes to pout in a corner and wait for someone else to handle Chaos, because that's a good idea. Let the people who grow stronger through rampaging violence have free reign of the universe to rampage and be violent with. I see no way this can go wrong.
No way at all.
This is a stellar idea. Not a flaw in sight for this plan. Thankfully for Nagash though, Sigmar shows back up with a Stormcast not too long after all this. Of course, once he's back, he doesn't team up with Sigmar, this time because he thinks he can handle Chaos on his own after he had some time to meditate and gain power or whatever. Once again, he fights Archaon, and take a guess how the fight goes. Hazard a guess. Go on.
Poorly.
You'll never believe it. And yeah, Nagash loses again. What a surprise. At least he didn't get his body destroyed this time, he just pussed out like a bitch. He also hates the Island of the Deepkin for stealing souls, Slanesh and the various elf gods for basically not just handing elf souls over to him, and everyone else for stealing.
Look at that. That is absolutely wicked looking. That is absolutely wicked looking.
Souls, Slanesh, and the various elf gods for basically not just handing elf souls over to him, and everyone else for having the gall to not just die and let him be in charge for all of eternity. What a guy. Oh, and he also started building pyramids again. Several of them this time, so he can make a ritual to drain all magic into his realm, and he'd once again be able to kill everything everywhere. Say what you want about this sociopathic asshole, but he's very determined and certainly has a sense of showmanship. The Chaos Gods themselves even popped by to watch all this go down, and at first it was going pretty well. And then the pyramids all blew up. Oh boy, I wonder what race of people could have done that. Yeah, he also doesn't learn from his mistakes.
No.
Ever. At first he was laughing at the Chaos Gods, saying he'd overtake them, then they laughed at him for being so stupid to let the exact same thing as before happen to him, only this time scaled up, and then he started laughing again because he still considered it a success. Turns out the ritual failing still made a magical black hole that drained magic towards its center that he could kind of go into for a bit and absorb power. Also, it caused the awesomely named Necroquake, which enveloped all of reality and death magic and started making spooky ghosts pop up all over the place.
Hooray!
He also unveiled the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, which
oh my god, this... I wish I could still paint, even though I have nothing. And I mean nothing on this. I miss painting like nobody's business.
Undead Space Marines to Sigmar's Fantasy Space Marines.
Hooray!
So for a little bit, it looked like Nagash was actually making meaningful progress. Then Teclis dispelled the Necroquake and blew Nagash right the hell up. Archaon got chucked into the void of magical light that is the outskirts of the realm of light, and also Alario cast her own super magic ritual that dispelled most of what death magic was left across the mortal realms.
Lovely.
He just can't catch a break, can he? Now he's once again reduced to not having a body and has less control over his minions than ever before. And thus have we finally reached the end of the story of Nagash, the great necromancer. Definitely.
No.
For real this time.
No.
Certainly. Absolutely.
No.
At least until he knits his body back together. What? I just called him the Great Necromancer. You gotta stop falling for this gag. Anyway, there's his story, but why don't we end off with some rules and such? A sort of mini do or don't.
Sure, why not?
Lore-wise, take Nagash if you want to have the end-all be-all boss of your faction on the tabletop, and if you want someone who's just straight up an evil dickhead, then there's no better choice for you. Plus, he's undead, and the undead in Warhammer are awesome. No sparkling vampire BS here, just fangs, evil magic, and a whirlwind of violence. Imagine putting Ainz from Overlord on the table, only not pathetic in all ways but his power level. Nagash hands it up at every moment, and if you want a villain that steals the show because of how unnecessarily evil he is, here you go. As for his rules, well, he's the god of the dead. Unlike how he is in the lore, he's no goddamn pushover here. 16 wounds, 10 bravery, 9 inches of movement, and a 3+ save means that he's faster than Eldar infantry and he's gonna tank almost whatever you throw at him. He can cast and unbind up to 9 spells, degrading down to a minimum of 4 if you take away 13 wounds, which good luck with that. Naturally, he gets a bonus to casting and unbinding spells because he's the god of death, and to put it bluntly, you're joining his domain whether you like it or not. He has a ranged weapon in the form of his death glare, which causes d6 wounds because he's such a stone cold motherfucker, and 3 different melee weapons to choose from just to really put the hurt on. His melee weapons hit pretty hard, not the hardest in the game, and anything next to him is certainly going to be feeling it. Of course, as is fitting for a necromancer, his magic is what you really want him for. He knows all the spells for the undead faction army he joins, and he can't join any of them since, again, he's their god. But let's just look at his personal abilities. For the baseline level of BS he can always unleash. He can either heal 15 wounds worth of damage or bring back 15 models from the dead, depending on what he's casting on. In a war game where chaff units are incredibly useful for tying down the enemy until they're inevitably destroyed and can make or break a game depending on how they're used, Nagash simply says no. These skeletons are not going to be leaving the table. He can give a unit a boost to their ward save when it's the combat phase. On a roll of 6 for a saved wound, he reflects it right back at the person who was trying to hurt him.
Lovely.
Soul Stealer lets him brutalize enemy units and heal himself in turn, so if you don't kill him in a single turn, he's just going to come right back to full health. And of course, my personal favorite, Hand of Dust. Within 3 inches of him, pick a model. If you successfully cast the spell, and you're almost certainly going to, especially if he's unwounded, take a dice and put it in one of your hands behind your back. If they don't pick the hand with the dice in it, the model is just dead. No ward save, no retreating, just gone, reduced to atoms. If they don't have a rule that's more or less specifically designed to prevent this from happening, like Gotrek or Archaon, they simply cease to be. I absolutely love how this isn't just roll a dice and on a 4 if they die, because functionally that's the same thing. They make it so you have to pick which hand it's in, which just makes me imagine some stupid Death Note level mind games going on. Like,
so not only is the character a dick, in order to play him, you get to be a dick.
the player using Nagash is like, he knows I picked my right hand last time I used this and will be expecting my left hand. Thus, I'll use my right hand once more. And the other guy's like, I know he picked his right hand, so surely it would be in his left now. But he might be expecting me to know that, so he must surely have put it in his right hand again. But what if he expects me to assume this and moved it to his left because of this? It's such a stupid little thing, but it's just fun to me to imagine it going down like that. There's no rolling, you have to play the Games Workshop mandated mind games. Anyways, lore flaws. He's a douchebag, so by picking Nagash, you are forfeiting any rights you have to the moral high ground. Yes, even if your opponent is the Skaven or Chaos, all that does is make everyone equally an asshole. Of course, that has its own appeal, but if you aren't looking for the absolute bottom of the ethical barrel, then don't go for Nagash. Also, as you may have noticed, Nagash loses a lot in his lore. True, a lot of this is because he's the god of the dead, and therefore just resurrects himself later, but it still makes him look like a bit of a punk. So while the numberless...
Well, it's not just that, it's just that if he ever wins... everyone's dead.
Horde of undead angle has your back. The leader of that numberless horde gets his nose bloodied a lot more often than not. I guess he doesn't lose as often as the Skaven do, but it's funny and destructive when they lose, whereas it's just kind of pathetic whenever Nagash loses once again. As for rules, there are still some flaws he has despite what he's got going for him. That degrading stat line means he gets worse as time goes on, and if you aren't careful, that just means that you might throw him into a situation without realizing he's no longer prepared for it. Soul Stealer can help mitigate this, but you still shouldn't put him into a melee fight with Gotrek or Archaon. Not that I should have to tell you to avoid getting into a melee fight with Gotrek. That's like telling someone don't stare at the sun for too long. And while his wounds and save do make him tanky, cannons are going to grind him into bone meal. Artillery of any sort is the bane of his existence because they reduce his save and make it so that his wounds almost don't matter. Because with enough d6 damaging shots, it's not going to matter if he makes one or two of those saves. Additionally, certain casters are going to make him look almost useless, namely Techless. If your opponent is running Techless, just forfeit. While Techless can only cast half as many spells, he has a guaranteed casting value of of 10 minimum, so whatever he's shooting is going off. This is on top of Teclis being able to auto-unbind one spell per turn and make it just not happen. True, if Nagash gets into melee range of any caster, he's going to send them straight to Shyish, Teclis included, but if he can't, the upper tier ones are going to make him look a bit silly. And given that there's decent odds there will be an entire battle line between Nagash and the enemy Magic Man, well, he also doesn't really buff his army, so you're bringing Nagash for Nagash and not to help out other
pretty
units,
much.
healing aside. Lastly, his price. 955 points means that if you aren't playing a large-scale game, he's just not showing up. Like, at least Big Turtle could show up in a game under 1500 points and feasibly not tank the army to uselessness, but Nagash will do just that. And even in larger point games, you are paying out the ass for him. He's almost certainly going to make up...
If you're not understanding what he's talking about with the points, like, whenever there's a game, there's a certain point value assigned to every single unit. Most of the games that I played with, I had a 2,000 point army of Sisters of Battle. If I had a similar army of Tomb Kings, Undead, stuff like that, and I decided to play Nagash, half of the points of my Sisters of Battle army would be taken up by one character.
Half, if not more, of your points allowance, so if you use him, you really need to know how to make the most out of the guy. And with that, I am finally, for real, done talking about Nagash, Warhammer's biggest douchebag. There's a whole list of things he's done solely to be a prick, but I'm not going to list all of them. If you want, though, go to 1d4chan. At the bottom of his page is a list of the various things he's done for no reason beyond being petty and evil. It's a long list. As always, thank you to my wonderful channel members. You are the books of Nagash to my Nagash, allowing me to continue Nagashing for the times to Nagash. Such is the power of Nagash. If you'd like to support the channel, feel free to become a member or subscribe. Theoretically, hitting like also helps.
Okay, so there's something at the end of this. I'm gonna let this go.
Helps me, but I've yet to discover how. Either way, thank you for watching and take care out there.
Alright, so let's see. This segment coming up. Hold on a second.
Nagash, Nagash, Nagash. Nagash. Nagash, Nagash. Ah, but Nagash? Nagash, Nagash, Nagash. Nagash?
That was... no. Okay. So that was... I'm not saying it again, Warhammer's biggest jerk. And, yeah, there's a couple of characters like this in 40k. Erebus comes to mind. Corferon comes to mind. Lorgar does not come to mind on this because Lorgar is just a fanboy convinced he's the main guy. He's the hype man's hype man. Oh, who else? Belisarius Call from doing all the shit that he did. Fabius Baal. That's... if you're one... okay, so there's the 40k analog for this guy. Fabius Baal. Because Fabius Baal does shit. For shits and giggles. Because he thinks it's fun. Because he's a dick. Trace in the Infinite would be another big one. That's somebody I could definitely say. Maybe one or two Necron dynasty leaders, but one or two of the Pharaons, but I'm not seeing any real analogs to Nagash and the Necrons, with the exception of maybe Trazen in terms of just pure dickishness. In any case, that was funny. I didn't know any of the stuff that happened. Like, seriously, when the end times started, what was one of the first things that I read that just made me just instantly just... I can't remember when I just was like 150 pounds of note towards the end times. I just had no patience for it. But it was really early on. And after it was all said and done, and, you know, after everything, you know, after all the updates had come through, Age of Sigmar started, I went through and I read the Wikipedia entry because I didn't want to read any of the books. I didn't have a very vested interest in Warhammer Fantasy anyway, as in comparison to 40k, in terms of, you know, buying books, reading books, stuff like that, and studying codex and junk like that. I just didn't have that level of interest to do the same, even though they're, you know, in many ways, like, one character is going to be the analog of another in 40k. But it was very early on when I just did not want to pay attention to what was happening with the end times. And then when, you know, everything was all said and done, Age of Sigmar started, I decided, okay, let me get the Cliff Notes version of what happened, and if it sounds interesting, I'll go in. But I was already irritated by what I was seeing coming out of Games Workshop at that point, which as far as Warhammer Fantasy. I read the Wikipedia entry, I closed the Wikipedia entry, I sat down, I shook my head, and I kept on going with life. That's how that went. In any case, though, Nagash is a dick. And it doesn't make sense. Like, every time in the lore where, anytime in any kind of body of lore where a deity takes over the domain of another deity, they become a lot more powerful. Except for Nagash. Because apparently Nagash can kill every other god of the dead, and he stays at remotely the same power level. In any case, it's probably because Nagash is plagued by fail. But that's neither here nor there. This was done by PancreasNoWork, and I'm going to have all of his links in the description down below, as well as my own. If you'd like to help out the channel, liking and subscribing does wonders for me. It does absolute wonders. But if you really like the channel, you'd like to support it, I have a Patreon down below. And there's a Discord and some other social media links. Pop in the Discord, say hey to everybody. And one of these days, I'm going to get through with the request for reaction channel. It is currently shut down, so I can work through some of the backlog, get things down to a respectable level. And I'm going to brainstorm about how to take care of everything. All that being said, I'll catch you guys next time.